Good morning and welcome. I'm Fly and today I'm going to share with you 10 great games to play with your significant other. With Valentine's Day coming up, I thought I'd share a few games to play with someone you love. Because, yes, there are games you can actually play with a person and still keep a solid relationship with them. And if worst comes to worst, at the end of the day you can still be friends, I guess. Or if you or your partner are not gamers at all, you can always use this list to give that someone special something different. So without further ado, let's go! Number 10 is Jaipur. This is a back and forth game where you'll be trading and selling goods on the markets in India. The game is played over a series of rounds where at the end of each round, the player with the most money wins one of these seals, and the first player to collect two of these wins the game. On your turn you are either taking or selling goods. When you take goods, you either take a single one or you exchange them for your own stuff, even camels. Some goods are more valuable than others, but these aren't as common as leather or spices. Because when you sell them, you want to sell many of the same to get a bonus, and the earlier you sell, the more money you'll get. It's a 20-minute tense, neat little game where you have to keep an eye on what your opponent is doing, as you don't want them to be the sole competitor for something like silver or diamonds. Number 9 is Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. This is the first co-op entry on this list. After all, you don't always want to be going head-to-heads, because, well, you love each other, right? Maybe a little? So this game is exactly what you'd expect it to be. You each play the role of one of the 4 heroes trying to defend the magic world from the forces of evil. Just like the books or the films, this is split into 7 games, with each game adding more stuff. This is a deck building game, where you start with your own basic deck of cards. These are items and spells that you can play on your turn to generate attack and money. Money can be used to acquire new, more powerful cards, such as the Quidditch guy, or the spell Wingardium Leviosa. Attack can be used to deal damage to the enemies. When the damage dealt equals or exceeds their total health points, they die. Over the course of the game, the bad guys will be doing bad stuff and try to control locations by adding these tokens. This is bad, you don't want that. And if you manage to defeat every villain before they can control all locations, congratulations, you win the game! For now. Number 8 is Unmatched. Not every game needs to be about loving one another, sometimes you might just want to go head to head and crush each other, right? And this is what this game is. You pick a character and try to kill each other out. Each player starts in a certain spot on the board, and on your turn you pick any 2 of these 3 actions. The character you pick has their own attributes, abilities, and their own deck of cards, which makes each character feel and play differently from every other character. Take these 2 for example. Knife Girl can either become big, which adds +2 to the value of attack cards, or become small, which adds 1 to the value of defense cards. Detective Guy can outsmart and often cancel your opponent's strategy. Unmatched is more of a system than a game. No matter which character you pick, the rules are always the same. And there are so many characters. You can pitch your favorite mythical figures against literature figures. There's Bloodsucking Fellow, Invisible Dude, Log Monster, Sword and Board Man, Arrow Shooting Guy. There are so many options. Some are melee type of characters, some are ranged, some have sidekicks and others don't. It's a quick skirmish, a great game to test your wits against your opponents. Number 7 is Targi. In this game, each player is a leader of a Tuareg nomadic tribe, trading for resources and advantages, to ultimately expand their culture. It's all about victory points really. First you set up the edge of the board made up of the 16 action cards, and then fill the inside with random goods and tribe cards. Throughout the game you'll be collecting goods and trading them for points or abilities, but the way you do this is quite ingenious. Each player has 3 workers and you'll be taking turns placing them one by one on the border cards. Each card can only have 1 worker and you cannot place a worker on the opposite sides of the column or row where there is already a worker. Placing across the rubber is fine. And then you place your tribe markers in the middle cards where your workers intersect. Finally, you and your opponent both take the actions on the cards where you have both workers and tribe markers. And you'll be doing this over a series of rounds until one player collects 12 tribe cards. in which the game ends and the player with the most victory points wins the game. This is a small game with a unique worker placement system. It takes slightly longer to play than most games on this list, but it's worth it. Number 6 is Codenames. This is the second co-op entry on this list. So you've probably played the party version of this game before, where you pitch one team against another and you're basically trying to identify all your cards before the other team does. Well, this version is just like that. However, you need to help each other to identify 15 cards in total, in which 9 of them are known by each player and 3 of them are common to both. Both players have this key card. It is made up of a double-sided grid. This grid matches the number of cards on the table and sits between both players, so each player knows only half of the information. In turns, you need to give clues to your partner, and do so by saying a number followed by a word to pinpoint all the green spots on the keycard before time runs out. Food 3. This tells my partner that I want them to guess 3 cards related to the word food. So, in this specific case, I want them to point bacon, banana and pizza. And if they guess correctly, I place these green cards on top of those words. If you manage to do this for all 15 words before time runs out, you win the game. This game is not easy at all. Every time someone makes a mistake, you lose a ton of time. I mean, I've actually only won this once when playing with my wife, and either we suck at this game or this is actually quite hard. And I like to think it's the latter. Number 5 is Hanami Koji, and this might be the most beautiful game on this list. In this game, you're looking to get the favor of the various geishas, which are Japanese art performers, by presenting them with the objects they like. This is one of the few games that uses the I split you choose mechanism and does it quite well. Each player starts the game with a few cards in hand and 4 available action tokens. On your turn, you draw a card and choose one of the 4 actions that's in front of you. There's an action that lets you discard cards, which denies both you and your opponents to use them for this round. Another action lets you hide a card away to score at the end of the round. But the most interesting actions are the ones that present your opponent with a choice. With this action, for example, you create 2 pairs of cards. Your opponent picks one of them and you get what's left, meaning you want to cut the cake evenly so your opponent doesn't take the slice you want. By the end of the round, it should look something like this. One player may hold the favor of some geishas over others. What you are aiming for is to get the favor of either 4 geishas or 11 points worth of favor towards your side. If you manage to fulfill this, you win the game. If you haven't played this kind of games before, they're a little different than what you're used to, but they're so much fun. Number 4 is yet another co-op entry. It is Arkham Horror the card game. This time we're entering the world of H.P. Lovecraft. This is a living card game where each player takes the role of an investigator, and you have to work together to unravel arcane mysteries and conspiracies. This is a campaign-driven game, where everything you do is meaningful and the choices you make on a given scenario will affect the narrative and gameplay on future scenarios. Each player also has the chance to build their own deck around the chosen character's abilities. You typically start out in a space in which you have to investigate your way out of. There will be a lot of skill tests, which will have you pull out tokens from a bag that modify your skills, and compare your attributes to the requirements. Although you'll be facing monsters, these aren't the only threat. You'll also have to deal with the arcane world you're presented with, which may drive you into madness. Number 3 is Patchwork. This is a game where you are competing to knit the most beautiful quilt. You'll be collecting patches of fabric and stitching them to your quilt, but be careful as this takes time, and time is a very important resource in this game. This is a tile drafting / tile laying game where you'll be picking up these polyominoes by paying buttons and then placing them on your board. Each piece also comes with a time cost, which will be reflected on the time track. The player who's furthest behind on this track is the active player. Some of the pieces you collect also generate income when you pass through these button icons. When both players reach the central area of this board, the game ends, and the player with the most buttons wins the game. By the end of the game, your board should look something like this. This is what I would call a comfort game. It's so simple and it plays in about 20 minutes. The perfect pick for a rainy day. Number 2 is Seven Wonders Duel. You might have heard of its bigger brother that plays up to 7 players. But despite the size, this one holds stronger and better on a head-to-head. In this game, you're building a civilization by collecting cards and adding them to your tableau. And there's actually 3 ways to win the game. You can do it like a peasant and work your way up by building a little bit of everything, and by the end of the game the player with the most points wins the game. Or you can shoot for the stars and crush your opponents with a military or scientific supremacy victory. For a military victory, you need to collect these icons. For each of these you collect, you push the conflict towards your opponent's door. It might then make lose some fortune along the way, but if you manage to take their capital, you immediately win the game. For a scientific victory, you need to collect 6 of the 7 available science icons, and if you accomplish this, you also win the game. But neither of these is an easy task though, because your opponent will be watching you closely and will give you a hard time fulfilling any of these. This game plays in about 30 minutes and it's so much fun. I almost always try to go for either the military or scientific victory when playing. This is one of the best 2-player games ever made. And finally, number 1 is the last co-op entry on this list. It is Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. You'll probably have heard of Gloomhaven by now, but if you haven't, well, this is your typical dungeon crawler campaign style game where you play the role of a character who'll embark on this fantastic adventure. I won't be revealing every detail, but it's fairly simple. You and your partner each pick a character, you collect the envelope with all their stuff, you open the campaign booklet and set up a mission. Each mission has an introduction and a few specific rules. You populate the map and you're ready to go. Each mission might have different objectives, but you'll be fighting enemies more often than not. And one of the most interesting aspects of this game is the combat, because you see, this is a hand management game. At the beginning of every round, you and your teammate each pick 2 cards to play, and you'll use one of them for the top action and the other for the bottom action. The big number on the middle also dictates your initiative. This is how fast you'll go compared to the other players and enemies. You'll have to play your cards wisely though, because certain cards might be better for certain situations, and once played, you won't get to see those cards again for a while. Once you complete the mission, you can go back to the town for a brief respite. This is another campaign-driven game, in which you'll get experience, money and items that carry over from one scenario to the next. In Gloomhaven, you'll face a lot of tense situations with interesting choices. It also requires a lot of teamwork. It's a great pick for when you're feeling adventurous. I mean, I picked Gloomhaven for this list, but there are so many other great games in this category, like Descent, Vagrant Song, Oathsworn, Massive Darkness 2, just pick your poison. You can't go wrong with any of them. And that is that. I hope you enjoyed it. What are some games you like to play with your partner? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and until next time.